Hello and good morning friends, welcome to the CEC-UGC live lecture. Dear friends, with our ongoing series on microeconomics, so far we have conducted numerous sessions. In our previous lecture we discussed on breakup of price effect into income effect and substitution effect, as well as we had a very good discussion on consumer surplus. So as I said, taking a series forward today, we would be discussing on law of supply and elasticity of supply, whereas in the second session we would be discussing on interaction of demand and supply and equilibrium price. And for this very discussion we have once again with us Dr. Kamlesh Ghakkar. Dr. Kamlesh Ghakkar is an eminent professor in economics. She is employed in Institute of Management and Research, Maharishi Dayanand University, Rohtak. Dear friends, I would like to tell you all that Dr. Kamlesh Ghakkar is a gold medalist in BA Honours and MA Economics from Punjab University. Lots of students are taking advantages from her experiences, and she has been guide to many of the students. She has almost 36 years of teaching experience, and lots of publications are into her credit. So dear friends, without wasting any time, I would like to welcome our guest Dr. Kamlesh Ghakkar. Dr. Ghakkar, welcome to the EduSet lecture.
Thank you, Gitika. Dear viewers, today in this session we are going to discuss about law of supply and elasticity of supply. Price of a commodity depends not only on its demand but also on its supply. So we should know what supply is. Actually, supply is the amount of a commodity which the firms are willing to sell at a definite price and in a definite time period. Supply is different from the stock. Stock is the entire amount of a good held by the sellers at some particular point of time, while supply is that part of the stock which is actually offered for sale per unit of time at some particular price. So supply is a flow concept as it relates to per unit of time, per day, per week, per month or per year. Now, what are the determinants of supply? Number one is price of the commodity. Price is a very important determinant of supply. As the price of a commodity rises, profits increase. So, firms are willing to sell more at higher prices. Then production technology also determines the supply of a commodity. With technological advancements, there is reduction in the cost of production and profits of the firm increase. So that is why with increase or improvement in technology, they are willing to supply more of a commodity at the given price. Then prices of factors also affect the supply of a commodity. A large number of factors are required for the production of a commodity. These factors are the inputs. If their cost is increasing, then total cost and even average cost of production increases and profitability of the firm decreases. So, with increase in input prices, supply falls, and with fall in input prices, supply rises. Prices of related goods also affects the supply of a commodity. If the price of a substitute increases, then naturally the supply of substitute will rise and the other commodities will fall. For example, if the price of pulses is increased while the price of wheat remains the same, then farmers will start producing more of the pulses and supply of wheat will fall. So prices of related goods also affect the supply of a commodity. Objectives of the firm. What a firm wants to achieve, whether it wants to maximize profits or it wants to maximize sales of the commodity. If it wants to maximize profits, it would supply as much which can fetch the highest profit for the firm. But if the firm wants to achieve sales maximization at some constrained profits, then it is willing to supply more at the given price. Number of producers definitely affects the supply of a commodity. If there are a large number of firms in an industry for the production of a commodity, then supply would rise, and if the number of firms is reduced, then naturally supply would also be less. So, number of firms also affects the supply of a commodity. Time period is an important determinant of supply. The greater the time period, the supply can be increased, and if we have the shorter time period, then supply cannot be increased to a large extent. So, time also affects the supply of a commodity. Future price expectations. If the firms or the sellers are expecting a rise in price in future, then in the present time they would supply less. But if they expect the prices to fall in future, then they would supply more in the present. Government rules and regulations also affect the supply of a commodity. If government is imposing taxes or some rules are there which reduce the profits of a firm, then the firm reduces the supply. But if subsidies are given by the government or other facilities are provided by the government leading to fall in the cost of production, then the firms will increase the supply. So, these were the determinants of supply. Now, we come to know what is the law of supply. Law of supply explains the relationship between price of a commodity and its quantity supplied, other things remaining the same. So, what it says, the quantity of a commodity offered for sale increases as the price of the commodity rises, other things remaining the same. There is a positive relationship between price and supply of a commodity. If the price rises, supply rises. If the price falls, supply also falls. But the other things, other factors are assumed to be constant. And why this supply rises at high price or why it falls at low prices, there are reasons. In response to a rise in price of a commodity, existing producers often run down their inventories and increase their supply. Some producers employ additional quantities of factors of production to increase the supply and avail the benefits of higher price. Some firms that are not particularly efficient at producing this item stay out of the industry when the price is low and enter the market when the price is high. For these reasons, supply rises when the prices are higher, and supply falls in response to a fall in price due to the following reasons. At a relatively lower price, producers don't release big quantities from their stock. On the contrary, they build up their inventories with the expectation that the prices may rise in future, yielding larger profits. At lower prices, profitability also gets lowered, and this discourages producers who decide to produce smaller quantities. Some relatively inefficient producers who don't hope to earn any profit at low price either stop their production or reduce it. As a result, the supply of the commodity in the market is reduced. This we can show in the form of schedule and in the form of a supply curve. In this table, we have shown that as the price of cold drinks is rising from 5, 6 and then to 8, 9 and 10, what is happening to the offers for sale of cold drinks? At rupees 5, the sellers are willing to sell 10 bottles. When the price rises to 6, they are willing to supply 20 bottles. At price 7, they are willing to supply 30 bottles. So, you see in the table that as the price is rising, supply is also increasing. And in the figure 1, we have taken price of cold drink on y-axis and quantity demanded on, supplied on x-axis, and we join the price and quantity supplied. 5 is joined with 10 units of the commodity, price 6 is joined with 20 units of the commodity, then 7 is joined with 30 units, 8 with 40 and so on. So, if by joining all these points we get the supply curve which is upward rising, showing a positive relationship between price and supply of the commodity. This supply curve can shift also. So, how does it shift? There can be increase in the supply or there can be decrease in the supply. When the supply of a commodity changes due to non-price factors, we call it change in the supply, and the supply curve will shift from its place and it can be to the right or it can be to the left. When the supply of a good rises as a result of rise in the price of its complements or a fall in the price of its substitutes or a fall in the price of its inputs or a fall in taxes, it is called increase in supply. And when the supply of a good declines as a result of fall in the price of its complements or a rise in the price of its substitutes or a rise in the price of its inputs or a rise in taxes, it is called decrease in the supply. So, when we show increase in supply, we can say at the same price there is more supply, or at less price there is same supply, and we can show this in the figure 2. Price is shown on y axis and quantity supplied on x axis. S is the first supply curve. Now you take any price, supposing I have taken OP, then the first supply is PA. Now at the same price I have increased the supply from PA to PB, so I get 1 point B. And now I take the lower price OP1, that price is lower, but the supply here remains P1C and it has not decreased. So joining the point BC, we get the new supply curve S1, which is to the right of the first supply curve. This is known as increase in supply. Then if we have to show decrease in supply, at the same price supply is reduced, or if the price is more but supply is same, this is due to non-price factors. Again we have shown this in figure 3. Price is shown on y axis and quantity supplied on x axis. SS is the first supply curve. Now take any point. Supposing I have taken point P, OP is the price and earlier supply was PA. Now it has come down to PB. So I get a point B. And at the higher price OP1, supply is P1C. It has not increased. So the joining of B and C gives us an other supply curve S1. This is to the left of the earlier supply curve. This is decrease in supply. Then there can be movements on the supply curve. They are known as increase or decrease in quantity supplied. When supply rises due to increase in price of the commodity, we call it extension in supply or increase in quantity supplied. This is shown in figure 4. You see, as the price is OP, supply is OM, and earlier supply curve is SS. Now as the price rises from OP to OP1, we reach at point B, where now the supply has increased from OM to OM1. So we have moved from A to B, supply has increased, but this is due to increase in the price of the commodity, so it is known as extension in supply. Similarly, when the supply of a commodity falls due to fall in its price, it is called contraction in supply or decrease in quantity supplied. This is shown in figure 5. Again, SS is the supply curve, price is shown on y axis, commodity supplied is on x axis. So firstly we take the price OP and supply is OM, and we are at point A on the supply curve. Now the price of the commodity falls to OP 1 and supply also falls to OM 1, which is less than OM, and now we are at point B. Now we have come down from A to B. This is known as decrease in quantity supplied. So you can see in the market that either there is increase or decrease in the quantity supplied because of the change in price of the commodity, but if it is due to the other factors of production, then you will find there is increase in supply or decrease in supply. Now we will see what do we mean by elasticity of supply. We have already done elasticity of demand, and now we should know what elasticity of supply is. This refers to the responsiveness of supply to a given change in price. This can be defined as the percentage change in quantity offered for supply as a result of change in price of the commodity. So elasticity of supply is equal to percentage change in quantity supplied divided by percentage change in price, or this is equal to change in quantity supplied divided by original quantity supplied multiplied by 100. This is further divided by change in price divided by original price multiplied by 100, and it is then shifted to delta Q upon Q into 100, delta P upon P into 100. 100 upon 100 is cancelled, and we get elasticity of supply is equal to delta Q upon delta P into P upon Q. Delta Q denotes change in quantity supplied, delta P denotes change in the price, P denotes original price, Q denotes original quantity supplied. For having the accurate measure of elasticity of supply, instead of taking original price and original quantity, we take both P1 and P2 and both quantities supplied Q1 and Q2. So what we will take, elasticity of supply is equal to delta Q upon delta P into P1 plus P2, first price and second price. It is divided by Q1 plus Q2, both the quantities, first quantity and the second quantity supplied. This will give us a better measure of elasticity of demand. Then what are the types of elasticity of demand? Number one is perfectly elastic supply. If at a price any quantity of good is supplied, it has elasticity equal to infinity. This is shown in figure 6. We have shown price on y axis, quantity on x axis, and in this case supply curve is parallel to x axis. Here elasticity is equal to infinity. Perfectly inelastic supply. In this case, supply does not respond to change in price. Supply remains the same. Whatever may be the price of the commodity, supply will remain constant. So what you see in this diagram, supply is OM, where whether price is rising or falling, it remains constant. So in this case, elasticity of supply is 0. As you can see in the case of perishable goods, in the market period, or you can say in one day, their supply is completely fixed, it cannot be changed. Supposing the raw fish brought in the market for sale in a day will not change, whether price rises or price falls. Or you can think of the vegetable vendor, whatever the amount of vegetable he brings for selling for one day, he cannot increase the supply. So the supply remains constant, whatever may be the price. It may rise, it may fall, but supply will remain constant. Then highly elastic supply or elasticity greater than 1. Naturally, in this case, the percentage in change in supply is more than percentage change in the price. Supposing the price of a commodity increases by 10% and the supply rises by 30%. So we'll call that elasticity of supply is greater than 1. In this case again we have shown price on y-axis and quantity supplied is on x-axis. First price is OP and supply is OM, and now the price rises to OP1 and we see supply rises from OM to OM1, and you can see from the diagram that the percentage change in quantity demanded is more than the percentage change in price of the commodity. So this is the supply curve and it is showing elasticity greater than 1. Then unitary elastic supply. In this case, percentage change in quantity supplied is equal to the percentage change in price. Or you can say, supposing the price of the commodity rises by 20% and supply also rises by 20%, then we will say that elasticity of supply is equal to 1. We have shown this in figure 9. Price is shown on y-axis and quantity demanded is shown on quantity supplied is shown on x-axis. This is the supply curve. So the first supply is OP and quantity supplied is OM. Now you see that price has increased from OP to OP1 and the supply has increased from OM to OM1. The percentage change in price is equal to the percentage change in supply. So this is elasticity equal to 1. Then elasticity of supply less than 1 or inelastic supply. When the percentage change in supply is less than the percentage change in price, it is called inelastic supply. In certain cases you find that a supply cannot be increased in the same proportion as there is increase in the price of the commodity. For example, we can say if the demand for food rises, so the production cannot be increased in the same proportion in the short period, so the supply will be less elastic. Again we have shown this in figure 10. Price is shown on y-axis, quantity supplied on x-axis. When price is OP, your supply is OM. Now the price rises to OP1 and you can see just it is almost a 50% rise in the price, but demand has not increased, supply has not increased by 50%. It is less than that. It is, you can say, almost in the range of 25 to 30% as is appearing from the diagram. This has increased by mm1. So in this case elasticity is less than 1, or we say that supply is inelastic. Now we will see what are the determinants of elasticity of supply. Number 1 is nature of the commodity. You know, the nature of the commodity determines what is the supply of the commodity. Perishable commodities are less elastic and durable commodities are more elastic. Changes in the marginal cost of production. If the marginal cost goes on rising, supply will not be increased in the same extent. Techniques of production. If the techniques of production are very simple, they are very easy and production can be increased easily, then supply will be more elastic. Availability of inputs for expanding output. If the inputs are available, naturally supply can be increased to any extent and elasticity of supply will be more. But if the inputs are not available, naturally how can we increase the production? So supply would be less elastic. Future expectations regarding prices. If future prices are expected to increase, then naturally all the firms would like to supply less because they would like to supply more in the future. But if they expect the prices to fall in future, then at the present they would increase the supply, and supply would be more elastic in the present. So future expectations of rise or fall in prices also affect the elasticity of supply. So thus today I have told you about what is supply, what is the law of supply, elasticity of supply, because these are very, very important in the determination of prices of the commodities, because the price depends both on demand and supply, and for this purpose we should know what these concepts were. Thank you. Hello viewers, in this session we will be discussing about how the demand and supply interact with each other and equilibrium price is determined. Supply and demand curves jointly determine the price at which goods and services are bought and sold. You know, the demand curve shows the quantities that consumers want to buy at various prices, and the supply curve depicts the quantities that firms want to sell at various prices. So now we will see how these demand and supply determine the price of a commodity. You know that demand is done by the consumers. They want to pay the lowest price, and the seller wants to have the highest price. So the price will be determined at the point where they will both agree. At that point, the seller is willing to sell the same amount as the consumer is willing to buy. At all other prices, what would happen? That either the consumers cannot buy what they want and sellers cannot sell what they want to sell. So equilibrium price is only that price where the buyers and sellers both are in a position to buy what they want or to sell what they want, and they don't want to change their behavior. if their behavior is changed, then naturally there will be disequilibrium. So at equilibrium price, demand is equal to the supply, or what the buyers are willing to buy is equal to what the sellers are willing to sell, and that is determined by the demand and supply, and the quantity which is being supplied or which is being demanded is also known as equilibrium quantity. Now, before Alfred Marshall, there was a dispute among the economists as to whether it is the supply of a good or it is demand that determines price. Some economists were of the view that it is the supply of a commodity or it is the cost of production which determines the price of a commodity, and other economists thought that it is the demand side. It is the utility of the commodity or marginal utility of the commodity which actually determines the price. But it was Alfred Marshall who held that both demand and supply are equally important in the determination of price. Now we will see how the price is determined by demand and supply. Now you see here in figure 1, we have taken price on y-axis and demand and supply on x-axis. DD is the downward sloping supply curve which shows that as the price falls, consumer is willing to buy more of the commodity, and SS is the supply curve which is upward sloping, showing that as the price is rising, suppliers or the sellers are willing to supply more. Now price will be determined at the point where demand curve and supply curve intersect each other, or you can say where both are equal. So they are intersecting at point E. Here the price is OP and quantity demanded and quantity supplied is OM. Here buyers are willing to buy OM and sellers are willing to supply OM. So this is the equilibrium quantity, and we have to see if the price is not kept at level OP, then what happens? If price is kept more than OP, supposing it is OP1, now what you see here, demand is up to P1D, but the supply is P1B. As the price is more, sellers are willing to supply more of the commodity because they want to earn more profits, but the buyers are willing to buy only P1A. So naturally, what do you see here? Supply is more than demand. There is excess supply. Now sellers are willing to sell more. Now what would happen if they are willing to sell more? They would definitely reduce the price to attract more customers, and price will come down from OP1 to OP. OP1 is not a stable price, it is not an equilibrium price. If the price is kept lower, if it is OP2, then what do you see? At price OP2, your supply is P2C and your demand is P2T. So now at lower prices, buyers are willing to buy more, but sellers are willing to sell less. So there is excess demand, and due to this excess demand, there would be increase in the price, and ultimately it will rise from OP2 to OP. So ultimately OP is the stable price where demand is equal to supply. At all other prices, either buyer are willing to buy more, or sellers are willing to supply more or less, we have seen. So that is why E is the only point of equilibrium. Now we see what is the effect of change in demand on equilibrium price. We have shown price on y-axis and demand and supply on x-axis. SS is the supply curve, that is upward sloping, and DD is the first demand curve. Both are intersecting at point E, where price is equal to OP and quantity demanded and supplied is OM. Now what happens if there is increase in the demand for the product and the demand curve shifts to D1, D1? We have already done that demand can rise due to any reason, because of the rise in incomes of the people, or due to change in population, or due to change in taste and preferences. So demand curve has shifted to the right. Now the equilibrium is at E1, where D1 and supply curve SS are intersecting at E1. Now at this point your price has increased from OP to OP1, and quantity demanded and quantity supplied is OM1. Thus you can say that as demand rises in the economy, there is increase in the prices of the commodities, and if the demand falls, then demand curve shifts to the left as D2, D2. Now it is cutting the supply curve at point E2. Now here you see the price is OP2, price has fallen, and quantity demanded and quantity supplied is also OM2, which is less than the earlier supply. So what you see here, that demand plays an important role in the determination of price. Supposing supply curve is the same, but if demand rises, price will rise, and if demand falls, price will also fall. Now we will see what is the effect of change in supply on equilibrium price. Price is shown on y-axis and demand and supply are shown on the x-axis. DD is the supply curve. Now we will not change the demand curve, we will change only the supply curve. SS is the first supply curve, and intersection of demand and supply curve is at point E. Here the price is OP and quantity demanded and quantity supplied is OM. Now what happens if the supply rises? Due to increase in the supply curve shifts to the right. S1 is the new supply curve. Now it is cutting the demand curve at point E1. Now the equilibrium quantity has increased to OM1 and the price is OP1. Price has fallen. Dear students, you must have seen in the market that whenever there is increased supply of a commodity, that day you find that prices are lower than what they were earlier. So rise in supply leads to fall in price of the commodity. But if there is decrease in the supply and the supply curve shifts to S2, supposing there are no rains or more rains and food crops are destroyed, so the supply curve of the food grains shifts to the left, and now the demand curve and supply curve are intersecting at point E2. Equilibrium quantity is OM2 and the price has increased to OP2. So, with fall in supply, you find that prices of the commodities increase every day, or many times we see in the market that when there is less supply of a product due to strikes in the factories, or you can say due to the drought in the economy, or supposing there is a strike of transport and things are not coming, so you find that the supply of vegetables, supply of fruits is less in the market, and then you have to pay a high price for that. So this way you can now see why the prices are rising. Is it due to increase in the demand, or is it due to decrease in the supply of the product? So in figure 3 we have shown what is the effect of change in supply on the price of the commodity. Now we will see what is the effect of change in demand and change in supply together. In the earlier diagrams we have seen only the effect of only change in demand or only change in supply. Now we will take this case when demand and supply are changing simultaneously. In figure 4 we have taken demand and supply on x-axis and price is shown on y-axis. So DD is the original demand curve and SS is the original supply curve, and E is the point of equilibrium where both demand and supply are intersecting. They are equal to each other, and that is equal to OM. So the price is OP. Now demand for the commodity increases, that is new demand curve is there, and that is D1 D1. Now here in this diagram I have shown that there is increase in the demand, and that is quite large, and so demand has increased, but on the other hand supply has decreased. That earlier the supply curve was SS, now the supply curve is S1 S1. That is the shift in the supply curve to the left, that is showing decline in or decrease in supply of the commodity. Supposing demand for food has increased because of the increase in population, but the supply has decreased because of the heavy rains or because of the no rains at all, so supply of food grains has fallen. And you can see also how we can show that what is the increase in demand and what is the decrease in supply. The increase in demand is from PE to PF. So EF is the increase in demand at the price OP, and the supply is PG. It has come down. Earlier it was PE and now it is PG. So you see here that increase in demand is EF while the decrease in supply is GE. So these both forces are affecting the price of the commodity. You know, as the demand rises, price rises, and if the supply falls, price rises. So price rises too much in this case. New supply curve S1 S1 and new demand curve D1 D1 intersect each other at E1. Now the price is OP1 and the quantity supplied and demanded is OM1. So this was the effect of increase in demand and decrease in supply on the price of the commodity. Now we will see what is the effect of a little increase in demand and a large decrease in supply together. Now in this case we will see that demand has increased, but it is a little increase, while the supply has decreased too much. So in the figure 5 you see prices shown on y-axis, demand and supply are shown on x-axis. DD and SS are the first or original supply curve and demand curves, and they are intersecting at point E. Price is OP and quantity is OM. Now we take that demand for the commodity increases. It may be due to rise in incomes of the people, or it may be due to increase in the size of population, or due to change in taste and preferences of the people. Demand has increased, and this increase in demand is up to, it was earlier PE, now it is PF. So increase in demand is EF, but the supply falls. It again may be due to any reasons. It may be, supposing, due to increase in the prices of inputs, or it may be due to increase in the price of its substitutes, or fall in the price of its complements. Supply curve shifts to the left and becomes S1, S1. Now what is the decrease in supply? This has decreased from PE, it has become PG. So the decrease in supply is GE, while the increase in demand was EF. Now you see here that decrease in supply is more than the increase in demand. Again, both these forces are working in the direction of rise in prices, because rise in demand leads to rise in price, fall in supply also leads to rise in price of the commodity. Now D1 and S1 intersect each other at point E1. E1 is the new equilibrium, and you see here that the quantity supplied and demanded is OM1, which is less than the earlier or initial equilibrium quantity, which was OM, and the price is OP1. So in this case again the price has increased. So in the earlier diagram in which we showed large increase in demand and small decrease in supply, we found that price was increased, but in that case quantity, which was the equilibrium quantity, that was increased, but in this case equilibrium quantity is also decreased. Now we will see what is the effect of more increase in demand and less increase in supply together. Now we will be taking the cases that both things are increasing, but their amount is not the same. Demand is rising more and supply is rising less. So what would happen? Prices shown on y-axis, demand and supply are on x-axis. DD and SS are the original demand and supply curves. They are intersecting at E. So the price is OP and equilibrium quantity is OM. Now demand rises to D1. Again, it may be due to any reason, rise in incomes of the people, rise in population, or change in taste, preferences, etc. So demand has increased from PE to PF. So increase in demand is EF. But supply has also increased now. Supply is increased by the firms by increasing the production, and now it has shifted to S1, S1. Now new supply is from PE, it has increased to PG. So again you see here that increase in demand is GF while the increase in supply is EG. So increase in demand is more than the increase in supply. You know, increase in demand leads to rise in price, increase in supply leads to fall in price, but increase in demand is more, so the result will be increase in price of the commodity. So new demand curve and new supply curve are intersecting at E1, where the equilibrium quantity has increased from OM to OM1, but the price has also increased from OP to OP1. So this was the case of that both demand and supply are increasing, but demand is rising more than the supply. Now we can also see what is the effect of less increase in demand and a more increase in supply. This is shown in figure 7. Again we have shown price on y-axis, demand and supply are shown on x-axis. DD is the initial demand curve and SS is the initial supply curve. Both are intersecting at E. So the equilibrium price is OP, equilibrium quantity is OM. Now demand rises due to any reason and it shifts to D1, D1. It is the increase in demand is by EF, or you can say demand has increased from PE to PF. Supply also increases because there can be more number of sellers, or there can be subsidies by the government, or there are some other reasons which are not due to the price. Then supply has increased and supply curve has shifted to S1, S1. Now you see that supply has increased from this PE to PG. So the increase in supply is EG, which is more than EF, the increase in demand. So what would happen? Now supply has increased more. Increase in supply leads to fall in price and increase in demand leads to rise in price, but increase in supply is more. So what will be the result? Result will be the fall in price. You see new supply curve S1, S1 and new demand curve D1, D1 are intersecting at E1. Now the quantity demanded and supplied is OM1, but price has come down to OP1. So in this case price would fall. In the similar way we can see what would happen to the price if demand and supply both are rising and they are increasing by the same amount. Again in figure 8 we have shown price on y-axis, demand and supply are on x-axis. DD is the original demand curve, SS is the original supply curve. Equilibrium price is at E, price is OP and quantity demanded and supplied are OM. Now demand rises and demand curve shifts to D1, D1 and supply also rises and supply curve shifts to S1, S1. In this case we have shown that both demand and supply increase by the same amount. They have increased by the EE1. Demand has increased from PE to PE1, supply has also increased from PE to PE1. When both increase by the same amount, you see that demand curve, new demand curve and new supply curve are intersecting at E1 and the price is same as OP. No doubt the quantity demanded and quantity supplied has increased from OM to OM1, but price is same. So now increase in demand leads to rise in price, increase in supply leads to fall in price, but both the forces are equal. One is moving in the one direction, other is going in the opposite direction. So they cancel each other and the price remains same. So dear students, in this session I have told you how the demand and supply are equally important in the determination of price in the commodity, and you can see in the market whether price is rising or falling, and you can find out what can be the reason. Either it is due to change in demand or due to change in supply or due to change in demand and supply together, and you can do the forecasting also that what would happen to the price if you expect any change in demand and supply. Thank you.
With this note, thank you ma'am. Thank you so very much for giving us a very, very precious session. Dear friends, if you want to give your feedback regarding this particular lecture, then you can mail us at info.cec@nic.in. And for accessing these lectures, we are going to soon upload these lectures on YouTube for you, so that it becomes easier for you to see the lectures, and all the lectures pertaining to the series microeconomics are already there on YouTube for you. So keep viewing these lectures and keep giving your feedback. We would meeting again very soon. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you ma'am. Thank you so very much.